Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Torah with your host, Rabbi Anibal, streaming live from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, in the local time, 12:05 p.m. on Thursday, April 20th. And welcome, everyone. I see a few names already here in the chat. I see Maria and I see Donna. Donna, is it taking a while to log in? You're here. I don't know why you say that. You're here. Yeah, I can read your messages. It's all good. And I want to know who else is there. If you're around, please say hi. I want to know who is in my classroom today. And, well, it's been a while since we studied together. We have to go back all the way to before Pesach. Back then, we studied about Passover, about Pesach, and that was great. Now it's time to move on to the next stage of the Jewish calendar, and that is the counting of the Omer. This spiritual preparation that goes from all the way from Pesach, from Passover, until Shavuot. So we are going to study about the counting of the Omer. Rocky Pollack is here. He says, Hineni. Very nice. Welcome, Rocky. Your photo on YouTube is different. I can't remember what it was before, but I can see that this one is different. They look really tiny on my screen. But great to see your name here. So I said, we are going to study about the counting of the Omer. I like to do this every year so we can get ready to celebrate Shavuot on a different level. Rocky Pollack is a new art. Okay, new art it is. New is good. New is good. I like new. I like traditional sometimes, but I also like new. I'm not afraid of new things. I like to always explore new things, learn new things, and makes it more interesting. So, about the counting of the Omer. If you've been doing it from the beginning, which is the first night we count the Omer, is the second night of Pesach, the evening of the second Seder. In fact, many people take the opportunity to count the Omer together with family at the second Seder. Some people do that shul before they start the Seder, but because many people start the second Seder early, so before it's dark outside, so it is traditional to count the Omer towards the end of the Seder. If you've been doing that, you're probably a little bit familiar of what it is. If you haven't done it this year, well, it's interesting because you can start counting the Omer anytime you want, but you will see during the class, you have to do it without a blessing from now on until the end of the cycle. Next year, you can start again with a blessing from the beginning. But to do that, you have to count from the beginning. If you skip one day, you cannot count with the blessings anymore, which is kind of like an ouch moment, right? It happened to me in the past that once in a while I realize, I missed counting today, and then that's it. I have to keep counting without a blessing. One solution, I always say one solution is, and I will show it right now, an app. There is an app for that, where you can, you see, it tells me there that I cannot count the next day for another 8 hours and 20 minutes. So it's great. The app that I use is set to be used in Winnipeg, so it follows the times for sunrise and sunset based on Winnipeg, and it will send me a phone notification when it's time to count, and when you open it will tell you still have that many hours to count with a blessing, right? It's fantastic, and every night it will give me a little meditation, something to think about during the counting of the Omer. And we are going to see in today's class why that's perhaps the most important part of the counting, the little study, the little meditation that you do every night at the time of the counting. Okay? It's that's the key. Shelly Chochinov is here as well. Shelly, what do you say? We're at the end of the first Seder? It's at the end of the second Seder. That's when we start counting of the Omer. I have used the app for the past 10 years or so. That way, I don't forget. Very good. Brenda Grossman and David Grossman are here as well. We'll see what they think about the counting of the Omer. Okay, so let's begin with the material that I have for you. And again, apologies that we couldn't study this earlier. But because of the calendar, we didn't have an opportunity to do it during Passover. 2 classes that we have to miss because it was Yontif. Yeah. It was Yontif. So we couldn't have Torah L'chaim back then. So we had to learn about this a little bit late. So don't worry. The next thing that we're going to study, hopefully before it happens, is Shavuot. Of course. That is also very important. Okay, let's bring the material that I have for you, and I'm going to hide the QR code so it won't be on top of the text. So I had this text for you here, and this is the place where we learn the commandment of counting of the Omer. So right out of the bat, what you should know is that because this is coming from the book of Leviticus, is a biblical commandment. We talked about this before. It's always good to remember that we have 3 main sources for our commandments, our mitzvot. Number 1 is biblical, right? In other words, we do it because the Torah said so. Number 2, rabbinical. We do it because the rabbis said so. And number 3 is minhag. We do it because it started as a tradition and then eventually became a commandment. Okay, those are the 3 sources. And I present it to you in that order because that is also the order of importance. Biblical commandments are always more important, or it's not that they are more important, they overrule anything that the rabbis may say. So yeah, they are ranked higher. Then comes rabbinic law, and then last but not least, minhag, a tradition. Okay? So in other words, you can't have a tradition that it will reject a rabbinic teaching and so forth. And you can have rabbinic teaching that it rejects a concept from the Torah, right? So this is from the Torah. The Torah said specifically and explicitly that we have to do this thing of the counting of the Omer. It doesn't say exactly how, but we are going to see that the rabbis are always there for the details. Welcome, Priscilla Kerr. Welcome to the class. I hope you can stay with us for a long while. I know, and if you have to go with a patient, we understand. Okay, Leviticus 23, verses 9 to 11, it says, God spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, oops, I forgot to mute my computer, and the phone there. Okay, God spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land that I am giving you and you reap the harvest, you shall bring the Omer of the first of your harvest to the Kohen, to the priest. He shall wave the Omer before God to be an appeasement for you. When we do that, on the day following the Shabbat, the Kohen shall wave it. Okay? So, let's try to decode what I just read here. Lots of things. Number 1, we have to ask ourselves, what is an Omer? Right? Because it said, you shall bring the Omer. And I didn't want to translate it on purpose, because there is a little debate among rabbis of what exactly is the Omer. Well, they all agree that the Omer is a measurement of grain. How much? We don't know. We don't know in this day. We don't use Omers anymore. Some people call it a handful. You know, when it's a handful of something, it's whatever you can hold. That is one theory of what the Omer is. The other one is enough food for one meal. That is another interpretation of the Omer, and so forth. But what we say is, first you have to reap the harvest. So it's already telling you that this mitzvah cannot apply at every time of the year, right? You need to have something to harvest. Okay? You follow me there? You need to have something to harvest. And because of because this is talking, this mitzvah comes right after the mitzvah of Pesach, we understand that is the first harvest of the spring, and that is barley. So the Omer is a measurement of barley. Okay. So once you have that Omer, you bring it to the Kohen, to the priest in the temple, and it will be a little ritual there where the Kohen will get it and move it. He shall wave the Omer before God to be an appeasement for you. Now, when you have to do this, and this is the most interesting part, on the day following the Shabbat. What Shabbat? We have 54 Shabbatot in a leap year. A little less if it's a shorter year, but doesn't matter. Which Shabbat? Well, there is a debate here as well. Because the mitzvah of the Omer comes right after the mitzvah of the Passover. Okay? The rabbis understand the word Shabbat in the context that the Shabbat is not the seventh day of the week, but the Shabbat in this verse is Pesach. Why would they call Pesach a Shabbat? Because Shabbat, usually we use the word Shabbat to talk about the seventh day of the week, but Shabbat technically means day of rest. And Pesach being a festival is also day of rest. So the rabbis, with the support of the oral law, so in other words, that you have to take a leap of faith and believe that the translation from Shabbat to Pesach was given to Moses by God. Okay? It was not figured out using logic. It was taught to Moses by God. In other words, God was teaching the Torah to Moses and said, you have to bring the Omer the day after the Shabbat. And then Moses said to God, but what Shabbat? And God answered orally, well, in that context, the Shabbat means Pesach, which is a day of rest. Okay? And what do I say that is a controversy? Because there was another group that sometimes I mention them, is the Karaites, which is a sect within Judaism, that they didn't accept the oral law, and they understand the verse literally, so they always start counting the Omer starting on the first Shabbat after Pesach. Okay? So in other words, they always start on a Sunday. It's that easy. So the date when the Karaites start counting the Omer is relative. The date, but not the day of the week. It's always on a Sunday. For us, Rabbanites, the one who follow the teachings of the rabbis, we do have a fixed date to start counting the Omer, which is always the night of the second Seder, but we don't have a fixed day of the week. Is that clear? So one or the other, and that's a thing. But that's the way we do it, and that's when we start counting. Now, the interesting thing here is, at least in this verse, it doesn't say anything about counting. It just says that on that day you have to bring the offering. Okay, the counting part, it will come in a different verse that I will share with you in a few moments. Let me see. Let's see. Maybe I can bring it right away. What it says. Anyway, whenever is the time, you will see it when it's talking about that. Okay, but because it's the first the first day of the counting, we present the Omer. The whole counting, which is a counting of 50 days, is called the counting of the Omer. But the Omer is brought only the first day. Any questions so far? Any question I would like to know? Okay, very good. Now let's start to try to understand why the Omer was required. This is the other layer that the rabbis are asking us to think about. So I would like to share with you this comment from Rabbi Ezekiah ben Manoah, also known as Chizkuni, and he said, it will not be appropriate to eat from the new harvest without bringing a portion of it as a gift of thanks to God. So this rabbi is taking it in a very simple understanding. He will say, don't think too much about the Omer. The reason why God asked to bring a handful of grains to the temple right after the first harvest is a thanksgiving offering. It's a present to God. Thank you for everything you give me. I will bring a little bit of thanks for this little ritual. Right? It seems fair to me. It seems fair to me. You know, if we are talking, for example, that God is asking us to give 10% of everything we make to tzedakah, right? It's logical to think that God requires to bring a little bit of our grains as well as an offering to the temple. So this part is good. Okay, so why do we need to do this? Why is it so important for us to be thankful to God? Well, let's go to the Midrash to try to reflect a little bit on that. And Vayikra Rabbah will say, Rabbi Yanai said, the way of the world is that when a person buys some meat from the market, he must expend much effort and hard work until he cooks it. Yet, while people are sleeping, God makes the wind blow and brings the clouds, which cause the plants to grow and nourish the fruits, and we only pay him the value of an omer. This is the meaning of the verse, you shall bring an omer, the first of your harvest, to the Kohen. So, right here, Vayikra Rabbah is also trying to make us understand how little God is asking us in retribution for everything that God brings to the world. So if you realize, you start harvesting, but everything that had to happen for you being able to harvest, from everything that happened to the ground, to the land, with the wind, the rains and everything, to you, to the fact that you were able to remain in good health so you could be there harvesting and so forth, so many things that we take for granted. And yet, says the Midrash, what God is asking from you is a tiny little bit, just an omer. So don't skip it, because it's just a little token. So let's see, I have a couple of comments here. Shelley Chochinov, you said, what happened to the grain? Did the priest consume it or if it's burned? I don't know. I'm not sure what happened with that. It looks like it was just, I should go read the Talmud to read about the details. It's something, because we don't do it anymore, right? I'm not sure if this waving that's supposed to happen is something that, is moved until everything falls into the altar. Not sure. That's a good question. I should go and learn the Talmud to see all the details, even though we don't do it anymore. From the point of view of the giver, that is a detail, right? If it's donated to the temple, or if it's burnt in the temple, or if it's thrown away, because it's still the giver have to release ownership over it in order for this ceremony to happen. right? Yeah. Now, but there is more. There are more layers for the counting of the Omer that I wanted to analyze with you. There is more things here. Now, the fact that the Omer is the first day of accounting is also very important. Okay? So this is the way it works. We bring the Omer and we count. Today is the first day of the counting of the Omer, with a blessing, of course. The next night, you say today or tonight is the second day of the counting of the Omer, and so forth. Okay? You do that for 49 days. And when you finish that, the day after is Shavuot, the next holiday. So in other words, I don't know if you can see the connection here. This is a connection from Pesach to Shavuot. The fact that you start the second day of Pesach and you go all the way to Shavuot, counting the days, is telling you that the two are connected. For God, it wasn't just that, it comes one after the other, but it was a ritual connection between the two. And now we need to understand why that's the case. Why we need to connect one to the other with a blessing and a ritual that happens every night. But again, I wanted to make it clear, the Omer was presented back at the time of the temple only the first time. And then the following countings did not involve any offerings. Is that clear? Okay. So let's start understanding now the why of the counting. Okay. The simple explanation is that the essence of the Jewish people is the Torah. And because of the Torah, the heaven, earth, and Israel were created. As the verse states, if not for my covenant, the Torah, day and night I will not have appointed the laws of heaven and earth. That is taken from Jeremiah. Torah is the foundation and the reason that we were redeemed and left Egypt in order to receive the Torah at Sinai and to keep it. Remember this? And Moses tried to give Pharaoh the hint that that's what they wanted to do. Remember, let my people go to serve God in the mountain. Remember all that? And Pharaoh said no, and then eventually said, yeah, well, you may go, but not the children. And there was this kind of negotiations. And anyway, so in other words, and this is something that we forget, the why the Exodus was necessary, why freedom was necessary. And there is a little bit of a misunderstanding there. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's keep reading. Since the acceptance of the Torah was the goal of our redemption and serves as the foundation of the Jewish people, and through it we achieved our greatness, we were commanded to count from the day after the first day of Pesach until the day that the Torah was given. This manifests our great desire for that awesome day, which our hearts yearn for, just as a servant yearns for shade. We count constantly. When will the day come that we yearn for, the day that we left slavery? Because counting towards a certain date shows a person that all his desire and longing is to reach that time. In other words, and this is interesting because it goes a little bit into human psychology, into human nature. We count all the time, especially when things are important. Right? I remember some gadget that I saw once at a friend's house that this guy was about to retire, and he bought online this magneto that it was like a watch that it was counting how many years, how many months, how many days, how many hours, how many minutes, how many seconds till retirement. So he would look at that every day. It would say I'm a day closer to retirement. It was very funny, very funny to see. But in the other thing, the other side, we have to also try to understand why we usually do countdowns, while the counting of the Omer is a count up. we start with 1, we finish on 49. And usually it's the opposite, right? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, etc. This is the opposite. We'll talk about that as well. But my point is that we should never forget that the idea of the counting is that we got freedom on Pesach, but that is incomplete. Freedom by itself is nothing. Freedom without the law, freedom without Torah, I wouldn't say it's useless, because freedom is still valuable, especially after my teaching during Pesach about the Dayenu, right? That it will be enough. If we have freedom but not the Torah, it will be enough. But God said, no, I'm going to give you the Torah. So get excited, because it's not just freedom. I promise you, and I will give you the Torah. So to the point that we count with expectations when the Torah will be redeemed. And by the way, when the revelation of the Torah is Shavuot. That is the anniversary of the revelation. That's why we count. But what we have to understand is, and this is the misconception that I was talking about, that we usually believe that the celebration of Pesach and freedom means that we are not servants anymore. Right? We used to serve Pharaoh. Not anymore. But even the Haggadah, if you pay attention, if you know what to look, you will say that, yeah, well, what we are saying is we don't serve Pharaoh anymore. Now we serve God. Have you ever thought about that? We are still servants. The difference is we just serve a different master. We don't serve a human master with flaws, corruption, you name it. We serve the King of Kings. We serve a divine King, the one that is fair, wise, and is, at the end of the day, is our Creator. So, what would the Creator want from us? We want to know. We are excited because we serve a Pharaoh that had no idea how we felt, what we needed, what we went through, etc. Now we are counting in expectations to receive the law from a master that knows us better than anybody else because it's our Creator. So that is something that I want you to reflect, that on Pesach we don't really celebrate freedom. We celebrate freedom from Pharaoh to become servants of God. Let's see, Rocky Pollack. So had Moses not found the people worshipping an idol unworthy of Hashem first try, we'll be counting less than 49 days. No, because what happened is, historically in the Torah, that the revelation came before the golden calf. So first God revealed the commandments. Hello, Arthur Solomon, welcome to the class. So God revealed the Ten Commandments, and everybody experienced God, right? That's what we call the revelation. And then eventually God said to Moses, okay, now come to the mountain. I will write it down for you. But that's why the 49 days or the 50 days are from the time that we left Egypt to the revelation, to the Ten Commandments. Okay? I mean, if you take it as a fact, if you are actually counting days as you're, like, you know what I mean. Yeah. So it's not connected to the golden calf experience. So let's talk a little bit about the fact that we count up, right? So Shavuot is the time of the giving of the Torah. In order to honor and elevate this day, we count the days from the previous festival until it arrives, like someone who is waiting for a loved one to arrive, who counts the days by the hours. This is the reason for counting the Homer from the day that we left Egypt until the day of the giving of the Torah. as this was the ultimate purpose of leaving Egypt. And I will bring them to me. That's the context of the Torah. So in other words, again, what was the purpose of the Exodus? Most people will say, well, so we could be free. But that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says the purpose of the Exodus was so you can serve God without anybody telling you, no, you cannot. So you can be free to serve God. In other words, so you can be free to be a Jew, but to the full extent of the word, right? A biblical Jew, if you want to call it. So that was the idea. In Egypt, they couldn't. And we will see eventually that they couldn't even circumcise the babies in Egypt. Everything was a problem. They couldn't observe Shabbat, of course, because they were not owners of their own time. They were told when to work and when to stop. But now we are free to have and to live a Jewish life. So that's the thing. Now, let's go back to Sefirat Haomer. By the way, the Sefirat Haomer, it's a book containing all the 613 commandments by number. So they will tell you exactly which one of the 613 commandments is, and it will explain a little bit about it. Okay? Now, on the Sefirat Haomer, it says, the reason that we count from the bringing of the Omer, so many days have passed in our counting, rather than counting how many days remain, shows our great desire to reach the time of Shavuot. So in other words, again, count up, not count down. Therefore, we do not want to mention at the beginning of the counting such a large number of days that remain until we reach the offering of the 2 loaves on Atzeret, Shavuot. Okay, let me explain quickly here what's going on. Remember I told you at the beginning, with the Omer, just a handful of grain. Eventually on Shavuot, it's going to be another special offering, and that is not grain, it's going to be a baked bread. I know, it's interesting because it's all the opposite from Pesach, right? Pesach is matzah. This is a beautiful, fat bread. Really puffy. The best of the best of the okay? And here, Shavuot is called Atzeret in this concept, but it's one of the names of Shavuot. So, one reason that Sefirat Haomer is saying is if you start saying we are 50 days away, it feels like it's too much. It feels like you have to wait too long. It's like if you start with 1, then with 2, then with 3, it's almost like the concept of baby steps, right? Like you just keep going because you don't really know how far the destination is. And some people will say the theory of the baby steps that is the best way to approach any kind of goal. Okay? So, but that's one thing that is saying. So, we should not find it difficult to understand once we have passed halfway through the 7 weeks. We do not count down the few days remaining, and one should not change the nature of the counting in the middle. So basically, it says, yeah, once you reach the middle, you should, you may want to switch. Now we count down, but I said no. Once you started counting up, you continue counting up all the way to the end. Now, why do we begin counting from the day after Pesach and not from the first day? The answer is that the first day is entirely dedicated to remembering the great miracle of Exodus from Egypt, which is a sign and evidence of the fact that God created the world and of the existence of divine providence. We may not mix something else into that happiness and mention a different idea with it. As such, the counting begins from the second day. So in other words, don't mess up with Pesach. Pesach has a message by itself. So mixing Pesach with the counting of the Omer is too much. It's too much. That's why we start after Pesach. And the confusion here is because we're in the diaspora and we have 2 days of Passover. So that's why we start on the night of the second Seder. The night of the second Seder, if you live in Israel, is not Pesach anymore. It's the beginning of Chag HaMatzot, the festival of the Matzah, which is the second festival which doesn't have much ritual. It's just that you don't eat chametz and you eat matzah. Okay? But when we're in the diaspora, for us it's still Pesach, and for us we are still mixing Pesach with counting of the Omer, but that is not the Torah intention. Okay? I hope that is clear. So immediately after we finish celebrating the Passover sacrifice, we start counting our days towards the revelation of the Torah, which, as I mentioned before, that was the purpose of the Exodus to begin with. Any other question? I would like to know. I'm reading the chat here, so if you're there, and if you can even say hello if you haven't. I want to know. I always want to know who is around. Okay, and if you just came and you missed the first part, tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time, this same class is going to be rebroadcasted, restreamed. Okay? This is get recorded and then it will be restreamed, so you can start playing from the beginnings if you missed a little bit of the beginning. So let's continue. Now, this is another thing, another layer. When a person counts the days towards a certain day, the intervening days have no significance. Let me explain. For instance, a person who is expecting to receive a large gift at the end of 50 days view the days of waiting as 50 days that are interfering with my receipt of the gift. And then a day passes, only 49 days remain that separate him from the gift. You understand this? I think this is fantastic. Hello, Holly. Welcome to the class. This is fantastic. When you're counting up, counting down, doesn't really matter. Let's say that you're counting days for your birthday, let's put it, or for Mother's Day or Father's Day. Every day in between is a day that you don't want to have it. It's a burden. Because if you wouldn't have these days in between, you will get the gifts right away. So yeah, you go through the days, you count them, but just because to celebrate that you are one day closer, but having to go through the days without the gifts is upsetting. So you don't want those days. If you will have a remote control, you will skip those days. You will fast forward, right? Until you can get to the day when you receive the gift. But here is different. Let's continue reading. But we relate to the days of Sefirat Haomer, the counting of the Omer, differently. These days are days of spiritual building. And when a person builds a 10-story building, he counts each story. I have built one story, second story, etc. He doesn't say, I have 9 stories left to build. Similarly, in the days of Sefirat Haomer, we are building and preparing ourselves for Matan Torah, giving of the Torah. God will be prepared to give us the Torah right away, but we are simply not ready yet. Therefore, we count the days of preparation and count the spiritual stories that prepares us for Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. So in other words, let's say for example, that somebody gives you like a gift of backyard furniture, right? You know that in 50 days, you're getting all this backyard furniture as a gift. Now you look outside the window and your backyard is a mess. Not only is a mess, you don't even have a deck to put the furniture. So you realize that you have only 50 days to get it ready. Otherwise, the gift won't make any sense. You won't even have where to put it. You will have to put it in storage instead of being able to use it right away to your benefit. So that's what happened with the counting of the Omer. The Torah is going to be giving to us on Shavuot. But do you have a structure to receive the Torah, to put the Torah within yourself? Are you ready for that? Look, I'm looking around. I had this beautiful studio here in my basement where I'll do all the streamings. I can play music and everything. But I had to prepare it before I brought all the gear. I have to paint the wall green. I need to install some lights. I had to upgrade the internet and get a new router. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to, I will have all the gear, but I wouldn't be able to present this class. So the same happens with Shavuot and the giving of the Torah. We are going to receive the Torah on Shavuot. If you're ready or not, you will receive the Torah on Shavuot. The difference is only the people who prepare themselves, we will be able to enjoy that gift. Otherwise, you will have to remain in storage until you're ready. So that's another reason why we have this counting, just to be sure that we keep track of time and we prepare ourselves the way we should, in a meaningful way. Any comments, please let me know in the chat. So, the Omer on Pesach, there's another comment. The Omer on Pesach was from barley harvest. Remember I told you, the first one is a handful or measurement of barley. The offering on Shavuot was of wheat. Remember? The bread, the beautiful breads. Now, I love what this rabbi says. He said barley is mainly food for animals. Wheat is food for human beings. Especially because on Pesach, the Omer consists on raw barley. And Shavuot is not just wheat. It's wheat processed into bread. That is something that only humans can do. Animals don't do that. Animals eat the grains or grass or whatever right from the source. We have the ability to transform it, to make it even better or tastier or more beautiful. So in other words, the preparation of the bread is hinting at our human nature to the best, to the purest, to the greatest. So let's go back to the text. The Torah hints to us that physical independence by itself still leaves man, from the Torah perspective, on the animal level. The counting of the 49 days signifies a sevenfold refining process, 7 weeks, right? Sevenfold refining process, and marks our progress to full human status with our acceptance of the Torah at Sinai 7 weeks after the Exodus. In other words, for a living being, accepting the Torah out of free will, in a body and a soul, that it was prepared in advance to receive that Torah in a meaningful way, that is the kind of human attitudes that God is expecting from us. And that's why we count the Omer. And we have to be sure that every day of the counting of the Omer, we do something to go from our animal side to our human side. Human side in the sense that we get closer to the angels, and say that we discover spirituality. We discover that we are more than just instincts, that we can control our instincts, we can overcome our instincts, and so forth. So that's why the counting of the Omer is so important, and that's something that I take it very, very seriously. I take it very seriously because it's so inspiring to count the Omer and to learn something new every day. So, now let's study a little bit about the how we do this. Oh, you're welcome, Holly. It's yeah, I like that. I like that teaching too. Yeah. Okay, so let's count. Let's study a little bit of the technicalities now on how we count the Omer. Okay, I gave you a hint at the beginning of the class, but I'm gonna go into the details now. It is a positive mitzvah to count 7 complete weeks from the day of the bringing of the Omer, as the verse states, and this is the source, so it's also from the Torah. You shall count for yourself from the day following the Shabbat. Okay, you should count. It is a mitzvah to count the days with the weeks, as the verse starts. Count 50 days. the Torah says. One should count at the earliest time. Therefore, one should count at night, from the night of the 16th of Nisan. And that's why we count on the evening service, because remember, the evening service is the first service of the day. The first service of the day is not the morning service. It's the evening service, when the new Hebrew day starts. So, in other words, and remember, we have to count both days and weeks, because the Torah is also talking about counting 50 days, and it also counts. It also mentions 7 weeks. So we need to use both numbers in our counting. And so let me explain how it goes. You count. Tonight is the first night of the Omer. The night after, tonight is the second, third, so forth. Then eventually you would say, tonight is the 7th day of the Omer, which equals 1 week. And then the day after, tonight is 8 days of the counting of the Omer, which equals 1 week and 1 day. So that's the way you do it. Okay? You count both in weeks and days, or days and weeks. Now, but this is the catch. Second paragraph, this is the catch. If a person forgot to count at night, he might count during the day. Okay? Counting should be done while standing. But if one counted while sitting, he has fulfilled the obligation anyway. Each night before counting, one should say the blessing. What is the blessing? Who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us regarding the counting of the Omer. Okay? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech olam asher kidshanu v'mitzvotav tzivanu al Sefirat Haomer. We say it out loud, the blessing. If one counted without a blessing, you also fulfill the commandment. Okay? And then you should not go back and make the blessing. And this is when you have to be careful. Because if somebody asks you, for example, can you tell me, right before, let's say you go to synagogue or you're at home and you're about to count, and somebody asks you, what day are you going to count? Oh, it's 8 days the counting of the Omer. Oops, you just said it. So now you cannot say the blessing, the recited. So you will see, if you come to synagogue, at least at Sherei Zedek we do that. We never announce from the bima the day of the counting of the Omer. We always give hints. For example, if we need to count day 14, this is just an example, the prayer leader will say, we are going to count the age of bar mitzvah plus 1. It's a different way of saying 14, right? But it's a way of saying it without taking away the ability or the permission for the prayer leader to say the blessing. So we use trick like that. Okay? So again, if you are sitting, you say it, you count it, it's still kosher, but it's preferable if you do it standing. And if you're not saying the blessing, it's still okay. Okay? So you say the blessing only if you say it at night. If you forgot at night, you say during the day without a blessing. But then next night you can go back to the blessings. Okay? But if you forgot at night, forgot during the day, and you go back to the next night, then you can count, but then you can never use the blessing again until the end of the counting. Okay? It's interesting because it's different of Hanukkah. On Hanukkah, it's not like that. Hanukkah, every day is independent. So if you forgot or you couldn't light one of the nights of Hanukkah, then the next night you go back to say the blessing. But the counting of the Omer is not like that because it's like a chain. It's not an independent. Every day is not an independent mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that is tied together. So if you miss it once, then you cannot go back to say the blessing. The way around that is if you ever forget to say the blessing and you still want to say it, well, what you do is you join a minyan, and when the prayer leader says the blessing, then you say amen, and then you count. That's the other way out if you forget. Or let's say that you just tuned into this class, you didn't count the Omer since the second night of Pesach, and now you want to start doing it until the end. That's great, but then you can do it, but you cannot say the blessing. And if you want to have the blessing, join a minyan. Join a minyan, say with the minyan, then you are going to at least hear the blessing, and you can say amen. Okay? And this is very important. The later authorities wrote that the counting may be done in any language, provided that the person understands the language. If he does not understand it, even if he counted in Hebrew, he has not fulfilled his obligations since he did not know what he was saying. It is not considered counting. So this is very important. Hello, Andrea. Welcome to the class. Very important that even if you come to synagogue, let's say, or you do it at home, and you read it in Hebrew because, hey, you took the Hebrew reading class. Hooray! You can read it, but you still don't understand what you are saying. You're not fulfilling the mitzvah. After you say it in Hebrew, you have to still do it in English or in Spanish or in Portuguese or whatever language you speak. Okay? It's interesting because that rule does not apply to every prayers. There are some prayers that it is okay if you say it even if you don't understand, but the counting of the Omer, the mitzvah is that you have to understand what you just said. Okay? Very good. And now, I wanted to share with you, why do we have to say it? What do we have to say it while standing? Remember I told you that if you count and you are seated, it's fine, but you have to do it standing. It's coming from here. It said, we have learned from our rabbis that there is a hint in the Torah that the Omer must be counted while standing, because it says, from the time the sickle is first put to the standing wheat, you should begin counting. The word standing teaches us that one should count while standing. Okay? And I just in case, I put the photo right there, in case you don't know what a sickle is. I didn't know what a sickle was. I had to Google it. So that is a biblical sickle. Where it evolved through the years, something that the farmers use. And yeah. So that's why the tradition of doing standing, and because it's an interpretation, it's not really a fully mitzvah. So if you're not standing, it's still okay, but it's better if you do it because of the hint mentioned in the Torah, right? So yeah, let's see if and the other thing that I don't want to forget is something that happened during the counting of the Omer, and is that we have restrictions. Okay? We have restrictions. Rocky Pollack, it is a prohibited weapon. Probably is. So, we have restrictions during the Omer. So what happened is, I will quickly read this. Rabbi Akiva said, if you have learned Torah in your youth, you must continue to learn in your old age. If you have students in your youth, you must continue to have students in your old age. The verse says, in the morning, plant your seed, and in the evening, do not let your hand rest. They said that Rabbi Akiva, this is where it starts, the connection with the Omer. They said that Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students from Givat to Antiprat, and they all died during one period of time because they did not treat each other with respect. The world was desolated until Rabbi Akiva came to the rabbis of the south and taught them. Who were they? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua. It was they who re-established Torah at that time. So, it was taught that 24,000 students all died between Pesach and Shavuot. Aha! So when did the 12,000 pairs of students die? The 24,000, when? According to the Talmud, same section of the Talmud, from Pesach until Shavuot, during the counting of the Omer. Rabbi Hama bar Abba, or perhaps it was Rabbi Hia ben Avin, said that they all died a terrible death. What type of death that is referred to? Rabbi Nachman said, Askara, death by choking. So in other words, the choking seems to be a punishment because they didn't treat each other with respect, in the sense that they were attacking each other vocally. They were saying bad things about each other. So the choking brings you back to this part of the body, right? It's interesting that he mentioned this way. And the Midrash tried to understand why they died. It said, Rabbi Akiva said to his new students, "My sons, the first one only died because they did not look generously toward one another. Pay attention, and you do not act like them." So what does it mean for us that happens to the students of Rabbi Akiva? The Shulchan Aruch will say, well, it is customary not to get married between Pesach and Shavuot because the students of Rabbi Akiva died during that time period, but it's permissible to get engaged. It is customary not to shave or to take haircut until Lag BaOmer. When is Lag BaOmer? It's the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer. Okay? When they say that the students stop dying. In other words, and I will make the long story short here, either getting married or other restrictions, they all stop on Lag BaOmer. We don't continue until Shavuot anymore. So the restrictions are between Pesach and Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer. The conservative movement reduced this even more, and they said that we can lift all the restrictions on Yom HaAtzmaut, Israeli Independence Day, because it's something new in the calendar and we have to celebrate it. And a good way to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut and recognize the state of Israel is to stop all mourning practices at that time. And that's a tradition that we follow at the Shari Zedek, if you want to know. And if you didn't want to know, well, you just know it anyway. So that's the way we do it. So that is what I wanted to teach today. I can't believe that I made it to the end. So thank you everyone for tuning in this morning to study a little bit about the counting of the Omer. I hope you will keep counting the Omer all the way until Shavuot. And again, if you go to your phone's apps, there are some apps that they are very interesting because they offer little studies that help us to go from animal to human, right? And to prepare ourselves to receive the Torah. And thank you so much. And if you're in Winnipeg, tonight there is a beautiful program at the shul. It's at Temple Shalom. It's called If Scrolls Could Speak, where we are going to learn about the story of 2 scrolls of Torah that we have here in Winnipeg, that they survived the Holocaust. They were taken out of Europe, and they made it their way all the way, one to Shari Zedek, one to Temple Shalom, and we take care of them, and we are going to learn more about them. So if you are around at 7 p.m., you want to come, you don't have to register right now. Just come and learn. It's more opportunities to learn about Torah, especially when we are counting of the Omer, when we are preparing ourselves to receive Torah. I thought it was very meaningful that we do it this way. Thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Give us a thumbs up. Share the video if you want. And the class is going to be rebroadcasted tonight at 8 p.m. Central Time. Bye, everyone. Stay safe. See you next week.